Well, here's a story to get us started. In my school, like in many schools, the senior class will play a prank on the school. Now, this particular prank I thought was fairly ingenious. What the seniors did is a group of them came in the night before school started, and with power drills they had unscrewed 30 or so room numbers and rearranged them all over the school. Now, this didn't affect the upperclassmen because they knew where the art room was and the Spanish room was and Mrs. Johnson's room and all like that. But the incoming freshmen, they came in with their schedules and they were trying to find their first class. Well, they would go to a class, say J3, thinking it's the math room, and they'd walk in and it was a Spanish room, and they'd be like, "Adios, freshmen." Anyway, the freshman would go outside, look up at the door, look at his schedule, and see that he had the right room number. Anyway, it was fairly chaotic that first morning, and in hindsight, it was pretty funny. Anyway, some family members helped me out with putting together a little video kind of reenacting what this scene may have looked like. Anyway, it's on the next slide. I hope you like it.
This is going to be a great year. I can't wait.
Yeah! I just found a Pokemon on my calculator.
What? I can't wait for volleyball. It's my first period.
I got library.
I got science.
I got math. Oh, gotta go. Guys, go, sorry. Yeah, guys. This isn't the right room. This isn't the right one, too.
Where's the gym?
Where's the gym?
Where is the gym?
Where's the math room? This isn't the right room either.
Where's the gym? This isn't the science room. Where's the science room?
Where's the library? Has anybody seen the math room?
Where is the gym? Can someone take me to the gym and slow? There's supposed to be a gym. I signed up for volleyball. Why isn't there a gym?
Let's say that we're interested in this question. How often are freshmen late the first week of school? And maybe that's different from the rest of the school. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at a sample of students, which is one classroom, 35 kids. Now I'm just going to look at these first 6 kids right now. And this is called Univariate Data, meaning it's only one variable, univariate. Sounds really fancy. We're just looking at one thing: how often were they late the first week of school for all their classes. Now I'm going to make a dot plot with just these 6 kids. The next slide I'll show you the entire 35 students, but just so you get the hang of how to make a dot plot, let's get started. So all I do is I make a number line, which you've done for years, and I'm going to put a dot above the number that represents each student, meaning here's Joe. She was late twice, so I'll put a dot above the 2. And Dan was late 5 times. And then, let's see, Fawn 0. She was on time every day. Same thing with Rochelle. And then Andrew 3. And then Jose was late once. So that's our first 6 students. And I try to make the dots the same size and about the same level. I'm doing this all by hand, just like you would do in your homework, I would think. And so this is what it kind of starts to look like. Now the next slide I'm going to show you the dot plot completed with all 35 students. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Here's our completed dot plot for one class of 35 freshmen, and don't forget that each one of these dots represents a student and how often they were late during the entire week of all other classes. Now, and it's univariate because we're only looking at one aspect of the student, just the total number of tardies for that week. Now look at this: constructing and interpreting graphical displays of distributions of univariate data. That sounds pretty complicated, but let's unpack it. Constructing, that just means we made a graph. And interpreting, so once we have a picture of our numbers, that's essentially what a graph is. We look at the picture and just describe it. We're going to interpret what information does that tell us. Now, I kind of sound like Sal Khan right there. And let's see, the distribution is how are the numbers distributed, or how are they spread out? And then, well, let's get started. If I look at, how about just the center of the graph? Now, if you remember, like 5th or 7th grade, mean, median, and mode, I figured out the median by counting off on either side. You probably remember how to do that. And this number right here is the middle number. That's the median, which means the interpretation of that is that half the kids have 2 or fewer tardies during the week, and half the kids have 2 or more tardies during the week. Okay, now let's talk about the word skew. You may be wondering what this guy is doing over here. I'm going to talk about him in a second, and he has to do with skew because it kind of sounds like skiing. If you look at the graph and you look at the middle, kind of like this is the center of our graph, which side has a longer tail? Which one is more spread out? And that would be skewed. Look at the longer side of the graph. And one way to think of it is it would be much nicer to ski down this side, right? Because this side is way too steep, okay? So you would ski down this side. Ski and skew kind of sound the same. So which side would you ski down? Okay, so we've got the center and it's skew. Let's talk about the spread. And we can also talk about the spread. The spread is basically somewhere between 0 and 8. All the students had between 0 and 8 tardies during that first week. That's the spread. And then the last thing is outliers. Look at this guy way out here. This guy who had 8 tardies. He was actually even late, over 2 or 3 times in one day in different classes. But anyway, this guy, he's so much different than the rest of the group that he would be called an outlier. So he's very much different than the rest of the group. In this case, I don't think so. Now, there is a way to calculate the outlier, but we're not going to do that right now. Well, we do look for something that looks like it's way outside the rest of the group, and he doesn't seem like he's that far outside the rest of the group. Now, here's a way to remember all of this. So here's how I remember it. Shape, outliers, center, and spread. Now the shape, that's when we talk about skewness, whether it's basically everything's in the middle or it's skewed to the left or the right. And then you would say somewhat symmetric, I guess, if it was in the middle. And outliers, if there's anything that's really dramatically outside. And then the center, the middle number, and then the high and the low. But the way I remember it is right here. So you say shape, outlier, center, and spread. Don't forget your socks. So that's what you should include when you interpret your graphical display. All those those 4 things that you want to talk about. Shape, outlier, center, and spread. I hope that helps, and keep going. This stuff is totally doable. Okay, have fun, and I'll see you next time. Bye.